Sarah's breath hitched, each inhale a shallow, desperate gasp. The flickering fluorescent light above cast long, dancing shadows, turning familiar racks of blinking machinery into menacing, silent sentinels. Her eyes were locked on the crumpled piece of paper in her hand, the ink smudged, the words a raw, gut punch. August 18th, 3 p.m. Terminal C. The package. Simple words. Terrifying implications. Not a memo, not a delivery manifest. This was something else. Something dark. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. She pictured Alex, his usual calm, almost detached demeanor, now overlaid with a new, horrifying understanding. The tremor in her hands was uncontrollable. This wasn't just a strange discovery, it was a deadline. A countdown. And Alex. Alex was at the center of it. He was going to do something unspeakable. And he couldn't stop it. But how did it all spiral to this? How did the unassuming IT guy become entangled in a web so dangerous, so chillingly Cold War, that it threatened to rip their world apart? For Sarah, Alex Volkov had always been a fixture, like the water cooler or the perpetually jammed printer. He was the IT guy, quiet, efficient, always there, but never present. He sat 3 cubicles down from her, his head typically bent over a keyboard, a silent guardian of the company's digital infrastructure. He was the kind of person you'd forget you'd spoken to 5 minutes after the conversation ended. This wasn't a criticism. It was an observation, one shared by everyone in the office. Alex was a ghost. His habits were a meticulous, almost ritualistic repetition. He arrived at 8:57 a.m., leaving exactly at 5:03 p.m. He ate the same lunch every day, a plain tuna sandwich on whole wheat bread, an apple, and black coffee. No social media, no personal phone calls, no weekend stories to share. When colleagues tried to engage him in small talk about sports or TV shows, he'd offer a polite, non-committal hum or a vague, almost rehearsed response. It wasn't rudeness. It was a wall, smooth and impenetrable. Sarah, a project manager known for her sharp mind and even sharper intuition, found herself occasionally trying to chip away at that wall. Not out of nosiness, but out of a subtle, growing unease. She'd notice things, small at first, almost imperceptible. Like the way he always seemed to be watching, not directly, but from the periphery. A quick glance in her direction, then back to his screen, too fast to be curiosity, too regular to be accidental. Or the way he held a pen, not like someone who learned in American schools, but with a stiff, almost old-world grip. One Tuesday morning, the office coffee machine had a meltdown. Steam hissed, grounds spewed, and a small panic erupted. People huddled, complaining, wondering how they'd survive the morning without their caffeine fix. Alex, of course, was summoned. He approached the machine, surveyed the damage with an almost clinical detachment, and then, without a word, simply fixed it. He didn't tinker, didn't fuss. It was as if he knew its inner workings by heart, a knowledge that felt deeper than standard IT troubleshooting. But what struck Sarah wasn't the repair itself, but his reaction afterward. As he walked away, a fleeting expression crossed his face, not satisfaction, but a profound weariness. Like fixing a coffee machine was a burden, a mundane distraction from something far more significant, far heavier. It was a crack in the wall, a glimpse of something simmering beneath the surface. Later that week, during a company-wide security briefing about phishing scams, the presenter showed examples of fake emails. One email, designed to look like a bank alert, used slightly stilted English, a few odd grammatical choices. Everyone chuckled at the obviousness of the scam. But Alex didn't chuckle. He watched the screen, his jaw subtly tightening, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps something akin to disapproval, in his eyes. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but Sarah saw it. He wasn't amused. He was calculating. He wasn't seeing a bad email. He was seeing a flaw in an operation. The oddest observation came during a fire drill. The alarm blared, chaotic and loud. Everyone streamed out, a mixture of annoyance and relief. Alex was among them, walking calmly, almost too calmly. But as they gathered in the parking lot, Sarah noticed him scanning the crowd, his eyes moving with an unsettling precision, not looking for colleagues, but for something else. It was the scan of someone trained to observe, to categorize, to detect threats. A soldier's scan, not an office worker's. The way his body held itself, subtly rigid, ready for something. It was a professional posture, out of place in a suburban office park. The first undeniable clue, the one that shattered Sarah's comfortable assumptions, arrived not through a whisper or a stolen glance, but through a forgotten relic. It was a Thursday afternoon, a particularly brutal one for the company's main server. A critical system had crashed, and the entire office ground to a halt. Panic was palpable. Alex, predictably, was already in the server room, a kingdom of flashing lights and humming machines that only he seemed to truly understand. Sarah, whose project depended heavily on that server, decided to brave the controlled chaos and check on the progress. The server room was usually off-limits to most employees, a sacred space guarded by biometric locks and Alex's watchful presence. But today, the urgency overrode protocol. She slipped past the authorized personnel-only sign, the cold air hitting her face, smelling faintly of ozone and dust. Alex was hunched over a console, his brow furrowed in concentration, fingers flying across a keyboard. He didn't notice her at first. As she waited, trying to be unobtrusive, her gaze wandered. That's when she saw it, tucked away on a small, dusty shelf, almost hidden behind a stack of old network cables, was an antique typewriter. Not a modern electric one, but a heavy, manual clunker, the kind you saw in black and white movies. It was incongruous, utterly out of place in this futuristic, high-tech sanctuary. Her mind immediately flashed to Alex, the man who barely used a smartphone, who shunned all things social media. A typewriter? Here? It felt like finding a quill and inkpot next to a supercomputer. A strange curiosity tugged at her. Why would he have this? Was it a bizarre, nostalgic decoration? Or something more? As Alex finally brought the server back online with a triumphant ping, a collective cheer went up from the relieved employees outside. He straightened up, wiped his brow, and finally noticed Sarah. A momentary flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly masked by his usual placid expression. "Everything's back online," he stated, his voice flat. "Good work, Alex," Sarah replied, forcing herself to sound normal, even as her eyes darted back to the typewriter. "Just curious, that old thing?" She gestured towards it. "Decoration?" Alex followed her gaze. For a split second, his composure faltered. A shadow passed over his features, a depth of emotion she hadn't seen before, alarm, then resignation, then a strange, almost defiant sadness. He didn't answer right away. He walked over to the shelf, picked up the typewriter with a reverence that felt profoundly out of character, and turned it over in his hands. "It's an old friend," he said, his voice softer than usual, a faint, almost imperceptible accent coloring the words. "A reminder of simpler times." He set it back down, carefully, almost like he was tucking a child into bed. Sometimes, the old ways are the best ways for certain tasks. He offered no further explanation. But his eyes, usually so guarded, held a distant, melancholic gleam. The way he'd said certain tasks sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. It wasn't about typing up a quaint letter. It was about something secret, something that required a machine that left no digital footprint. An analog tool in a digital world. The image of that typewriter gnawed at her all weekend. An old friend. A reminder of simpler times. And that fleeting accent. It was unmistakable now that she was listening for it. Not overtly Russian, but subtly Eastern European. She started to reevaluate every interaction, every observation. The odd sentence structure. The slightly formal manner of speech. The way he pronounced certain words. It all clicked into place, painting a picture of a man who wasn't born and raised in small-town America. Her curiosity, once a gentle nudge, now became a forceful push. On Monday morning, fueled by a restless night, Sarah decided to take a calculated risk. She waited until Alex was out of his cubicle for his usual morning coffee run. With a quick glance around, her heart pounding, she slipped into his workspace. She knew it was wrong, a violation of privacy, but the typewriter and his strange reaction had ignited a fire of suspicion she couldn't ignore. Her eyes scanned his desk, expecting to find nothing, his space always impeccably neat. But tucked beneath a stack of network diagrams, partially obscured, was a single sheet of paper. It looked like a printout, but on closer inspection, she saw it was a faint carbon copy, a ghost image. And the text, it was typed. On that typewriter. The carbon copy, with its chilling fragments of KGB and Project Nightingale, felt like a grenade in Sarah's hands. She quickly slipped it back, her fingers trembling, before Alex returned. The image of the Cyrillic script and the partial decode burned into her mind. Her initial unease had morphed into outright alarm. This wasn't just peculiar, it was dangerous. The rest of the day passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her mind was a whirlwind of Cold War movies and spy novels. Could it really be? In their modern, tech-savvy office? A real-life Soviet spy? The idea was absurd, yet the evidence, however slim, was now undeniable. That evening, instead of unwinding with her usual podcast, Sarah found herself hunched over her laptop, embarking on a deep, cautious dive into the digital abyss. Her first instinct was to search for Alex Volkov. But what she found, or rather, what she didn't find, was even more unsettling. There was nothing. No social media profiles, no LinkedIn, no past employment history that lingered online. Not even a passing mention in a community forum or an old-school yearbook. It was as if Alex Volkov simply didn't exist before he started working at their company 5 years ago. For anyone under the age of 50 in the modern world, this was virtually impossible. Everyone left a digital footprint, a breadcrumb trail of their existence. To have absolutely nothing was not an absence, it was an erasure. A deliberate, meticulous scrubbing. This wasn't a person who avoided technology. This was a person who was invisible to it. Her next search was KGB Project Nightingale. The results were sparse, mostly speculative conspiracy theories or obscure historical documents. But one name kept reappearing, often linked to unconfirmed rumors of deep-cover agents and sleeper cells deployed during the late Cold War. Operation Nightingale. Not project, but operation. It was a subtle difference, but one that resonated with the fragment she'd seen. And the few credible sources described it as a highly secretive, long-term infiltration program, designed to embed agents so deeply that they became indistinguishable from ordinary citizens. Agents who would only be activated years, even decades later. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Could Alex be one of them? A phantom from a bygone era, quietly existing, waiting? But waiting for what? The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union was gone. Then, a flicker of an idea, the faint accent, the specific formal phrasing, the way he carried himself. It suggested a man who hadn't learned English as a child. A man who might have been trained to speak it perfectly, but whose roots lay elsewhere. She shifted her search, trying to connect Volkov to other terms. Soviet defector, Russian emigre. Still nothing concrete. The man was a ghost, online and off. Her frustration grew. How do you investigate someone who leaves no trace? She decided to think like Alex. If he was from a different era, how would he communicate? Secure channels, perhaps? And that typewriter? It screamed analog security. If he was being blackmailed, as the severe crime in the video title suggested, then someone was communicating with him. And that communication wouldn't be via email. She started observing him more closely. Not just his work habits, but his interactions outside the office. She discreetly parked her car down the street after work, waiting. One evening, she saw him walk to a payphone, A payphone, several blocks from the office, well out of sight of any security cameras. He talked for a few minutes, his back to her, his posture rigid. When he hung up, she saw him rub his temple, a gesture of profound stress. He looked trapped. His shoulders slumped, and he seemed to age 5 years in that single moment. He wasn't just peculiar, he was tormented. The pieces, though still fragmented, were beginning to form a terrifying mosaic. Alex Volkov, a man without a past, with Cold War-era tools and communication methods, exhibiting signs of extreme stress and operating under the radar. The severe crime now felt less like a hypothetical and more like an imminent threat. The next day, driven by a desperate need for more information, Sarah took another risk. She knew Alex's schedule by heart. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., he had a standing meeting with the head of IT offsite. It was her best chance. She waited until he left, then approached his cubicle. This time, she wasn't looking for a casual clue. She was searching. Her eyes darted to the small, locked filing cabinet under his desk. It was an old model, not digital, requiring a physical key. She'd always assumed it held old manuals or spare parts. But now, it felt like a vault. She knew she shouldn't, but the image of KGB and the desperate look on Alex's face propelled her forward. She tried a few common keys, no luck. Then, she remembered something. Alex always kept a small, tarnished silver key on his keyring, nestled amongst his car and house keys. She'd seen it once when he dropped them. It looked out of place, too old for anything modern. She hurried to his coat, which hung on the back of his chair. Her heart hammered. If he walked back in? Her fingers fumbled, found the keyring, then the small, old key. With a silent prayer, she inserted it into the filing cabinet lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside, there weren't manuals. There was a single, worn leather-bound journal. And a small, nondescript envelope. The journal was filled with the same precise, elegant Cyrillic script she'd seen on the carbon copy. It was handwritten. This was Alex's personal record. But what truly froze her blood was the envelope. It contained a series of photographs. Old photographs. Grainy, black and white images. A young woman smiling, her face full of life. A child, a small boy, perhaps 5 or 6, looking up at the camera with wide, innocent eyes. And then, a more recent photo, digital this time, but carefully printed. The same woman, older now, frail, in what looked like a hospital bed. And the same boy, grown into a man, standing beside her, his face etched with worry. Below the recent photo, crudely scrawled in thick, black marker, were 2 words, the package. And then, another date, August 18th, 3 p.m. The images in the envelope screamed the truth. Alex Volkov wasn't just a spy, he was a victim. His family, his past, his very humanity, were the unseen strings pulling him towards an unthinkable act. Sarah felt a profound wave of despair wash over her, quickly replaced by a surge of righteous anger. Who would do this? Who held such power over another human being? She flipped through the journal, hoping for some clue, some explanation in the elegant Cyrillic. She couldn't read the script, but she recognized dates, names that appeared frequently, and the occasional diagram. One set of pages, in particular, caught her eye. It contained a schematic, crudely drawn, but unmistakably showing a detailed layout of what looked like an airport terminal. And circled, repeatedly, were the letters Terminal C. A knot tightened in her stomach. Terminal C. The same detail from the crumpled paper. The same detail from the cold open. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a blueprint. Her eyes darted back to the black and white photos. The young woman, vibrant and full of hope. The child, innocent and smiling. These were not just pictures. They were the faces of Alex's impossible choice. Someone had found his deepest vulnerability, his long-buried life, and was exploiting it with cruel precision. It explained the weightiness she'd sometimes seen in his eyes, the profound weariness. He wasn't just a ghost. He was a man haunted by a past he couldn't escape, blackmailed into a future he abhorred. But why Alex? Why now? The Cold War was history. Who had this kind of information, and the power to activate a decades-old sleeper agent? The answer, she realized, had to be someone from that same shadowy past. Someone who knew about Operation Nightingale, someone who had kept tabs, patiently waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect leverage. Sarah closed the journal, her mind racing. She had confirmation of the blackmail, the method, a sleeper agent from a bygone era, the target, Terminal C, and the terrifying deadline, August 18th, 3 p.m. That was today. The time was just past 11 a.m. She had less than 4 hours. She needed to understand the severe crime. The package. The word itself was vague, menacing. But combined with the airport terminal, it could only mean one thing. Something catastrophic. A bomb. A biological agent. A diversion for something even worse. The scale of the threat suddenly became terrifyingly real. Thousands of lives could be at stake. The gravity of the situation pressed down on her, suffocating. She was just an office worker. What was she supposed to do? Go to the police? My weird IT guy is a Soviet spy being blackmailed to blow up an airport based on an old typewriter, some grainy photos, and a cryptic note. They'd laugh her out of the station. Or worse, they'd assume she was part of it. She glanced at her watch. Time was slipping away. Alex would be back soon. She had to put everything back exactly as she found it. Her hands moved with frantic precision, returning the journal, the photos, locking the cabinet, replacing the key. She smoothed down his coat, trying to erase any trace of her intrusion. As she walked back to her cubicle, the office noise felt distant, muffled. Every click of a mouse, every murmur of conversation, seemed irrelevant. A massive, silent operation was unfolding, right under their noses, orchestrated by unseen forces, powered by a man's broken will. She looked at Alex's empty chair, then at the clock. August 18th, 3 p.m. Terminal C. The package. He was about to do something unspeakable. And Sarah, an ordinary project manager, was the only one who knew. She was standing on the precipice of a global disaster, armed with nothing but a desperate hunch and a pounding heart. The weight of the journal pressed against Sarah's chest, not physically, but spiritually. Her mind was a kaleidoscope of frantic images. Alex's haunted eyes, the smiling faces in the photos, the chilling outline of Terminal C, and the omnipresent, suffocating threat of the package. She was an ordinary project manager, not a spy, not an FBI agent. This wasn't her world. Yet, she was inexplicably, terrifyingly in it. Her first instinct screamed, "Call the authorities." But a colder, more logical part of her mind immediately shut that down. What would she tell them? My colleague, who has no digital footprint, is a Soviet spy being blackmailed because I found some old photos and a typewriter, and he's going to do something at the airport in a few hours? It sounded unhinged. Even if they believed her, what then? They'd descend on Alex, arrest him, and his family, held hostage by these unseen orchestrators, would be instantly at risk. The blackmailers wouldn't hesitate. Alex knew this. That's why he was so trapped. She couldn't sacrifice his family to save strangers. It wasn't justice. It was collateral damage. No. She had to handle this herself. She had to stop Alex without the full force of law enforcement, without blowing his cover, and most importantly, without giving the blackmailers any reason to harm his family. It was an impossible tightrope walk, and the ground below was a fiery chasm. Her knowledge of Alex, piecemeal and observational, was now her greatest asset. She had seen his meticulous routines, his subtle tells, his almost robotic adherence to patterns. If he was being controlled, there had to be a mechanism, a trigger, a way he was receiving instructions. And just as importantly, she needed to understand what the package was. Was it a bomb? A biological weapon? A data breach of immense scale? The nature of the threat would dictate her response. She went back to her cubicle, The dull roar of the office a dissonant soundtrack to her racing thoughts. She pulled out her laptop, but instead of work, she opened a blank document, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She started typing, a frantic stream of consciousness, trying to piece together every tiny detail, every peculiar habit she'd observed in Alex. Her eyes fell on her own watch. 11:37 a.m. She had just over 3 hours. She needed to find the thread, the link between the blackmailers and Alex's immediate actions. How were they communicating the final instructions? The typewriter suggested an analog method, but that was for messages he sent or received physically. For an operation this time sensitive, there had to be a more immediate, yet still secure channel. Her gaze drifted towards Alex's desk again. He was gone, probably on his way to his usual lunch spot. She knew his routine down to the minute. He'd be back at 12:30 p.m. That gave her 53 minutes. Not enough time for a full search, but enough for a targeted one. She remembered the way he'd instinctively reached for his watch after the server room incident, almost as if checking something beyond the time. And the way he had consistently avoided company tech for anything personal. It clicked. What if the communication wasn't through a device at all, but through a medium? A dead drop, sure, but what if it was something more subtle, more integrated into his daily life? She walked back to his cubicle, her heart a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She scanned his desk. Neat. Minimalist. Just a monitor, keyboard, mouse, a pen holder with 3 pens, and a small, leather-bound notebook, almost identical to the journal she'd found, but clearly for work notes. She hesitated, then picked up the notebook. It was filled with IT jargon, network configurations, server logs. Nothing out of place. But then, her eyes landed on the pen holder. 3 pens. A blue, a black, and a red. She remembered him using the black and blue constantly. But the red? She'd never seen him use it. It looked almost unused, its tip pristine. She picked it up. It felt heavier than it should. A faint, almost imperceptible seam ran around its middle. A twist. It unscrewed. Inside, no ink cartridge. Instead, a tightly rolled, miniature piece of paper. Her hand shook as she unrolled it. The paper was impossibly thin, almost translucent. And on it, in microprint, was a series of symbols. Not Cyrillic, not English letters. It looked like a sequence of numbers and geometric shapes. A code. A cipher. A one-time pad. A Cold War spy's best friend. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't just old school. It was ancient, highly sophisticated tradecraft. This pen wasn't just a pen. It was a secure communication device, a miniature dead drop. The blackmailer wasn't relying on digital vulnerabilities. They were relying on Alex's deeply ingrained training. And then, another realization, more horrifying. If this was a one-time pad, the key to decipher it would be unique. And if it was that sophisticated, the key would likely be something Alex carried, something he could consult without drawing suspicion. She looked at the pen again, then at his watch. His analog watch. He never looked at his phone for the time. He always used that watch. What if the numbers on its face, the positions of its hands, combined with a rotating bezel or a specific sequence, were the key? Her mind reeled. This was beyond her capabilities. She needed to decode this. And she needed help. But who could she trust? The tiny, coded message felt like a live wire, buzzing with deadly secrets. Sarah knew she was out of her depth. This wasn't about IT skills or project management. This was about cryptography, a field she knew nothing about. But the sheer urgency, the image of Terminal C, propelled her forward. She couldn't just give up. She quickly reassembled the pen, placing it back in the holder exactly as she found it. Alex would be back any minute. She had to move fast, think faster. Her mind raced through her limited circle of trust. Who knew about codes? Who could possibly help without asking too many questions, without involving a chain of command that could be too slow, or worse, compromised? Then, a name flashed into her mind, Dr. Eris Thorne. An eccentric, brilliant, and notoriously reclusive professor of linguistics and ancient scripts from her alma mater. He was a fringe academic, often ridiculed for his theories on universal linguistic patterns and hidden ciphers in historical texts. But he was also fiercely intelligent and, crucially, a man who lived outside conventional systems. He wouldn't immediately run to the police. He'd be intrigued by the puzzle. She quickly grabbed her phone. Her fingers flew across the keypad, searching for his contact. She hadn't spoken to him in years, not since a particularly challenging research paper in college where he'd been an obscure, yet invaluable resource. "Professor Thorne?" She blurted out when he finally answered, his voice a gravelly rumble. "This is Sarah Chen. From your ancient cipher seminar, 10 years ago?" There was a long pause, then a sigh. "Ah, the one who tried to argue that Phoenician was an early form of ASCI. I remember. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure, Ms. Chen?" "Professor, I have something. Something extraordinary. A cipher. Extremely time-sensitive. I believe it's a one-time pad, Cold War era, possibly Soviet. I need your help. Now." She kept her voice low, almost a whisper, acutely aware of her surroundings. Another pause, this one shorter, filled with a curious hum. "Soviet, you say? A one-time pad? Fascinating. And time-sensitive? How time-sensitive?" "Hours, Professor. Possibly less than 3 hours." A low whistle. "Well, that is a challenge. Where are you?" I can't say over the phone. But I can come to you." "Are you at your office?" "Always, Ms. Chen. Always. Bring your artifact. And be prepared to explain yourself." Relief washed over her, fleeting but potent. She had a chance. She had to get out of the office. But how? She couldn't just vanish. Just as she was about to call her boss to fabricate an emergency, Alex appeared in the doorway of his cubicle, a tuna sandwich in one hand, his black coffee in the other. He stopped, his gaze sweeping over the office, then settling on her. For a split second, their eyes locked. Sarah felt a jolt. Had he seen her? Was the pen out of place? She forced herself to smile, a casual, office-friendly smile. "Hey Alex, everything good with the server?" He nodded, a barely perceptible dip of his head. "Yes. All stable." His eyes lingered on her for another beat. Then he turned and slipped into his cubicle. The interaction was brief, almost mundane, but it left Sarah breathless. She felt like a mouse under the gaze of a hawk. He was watching. He knew something was up. Or perhaps his instincts were simply heightened due to the immense pressure he was under. Either way, she couldn't risk another move in the office. She quickly sent an email to her manager. Subject: urgent family matter. Body: unexpected emergency, need to leave immediately. Will work remotely if possible. Apologies for short notice. She hit send, grabbed her bag, and walked towards the exit, trying to maintain an outward calm she didn't feel. Every step felt like a gamble. She imagined Alex's eyes on her back, burning through the cubicle wall. She reached her car, heart still pounding, and pulled out the tiny, rolled-up paper. She needed to get to Professor Thorne, and fast. The drive across town felt endless. The city, usually a comforting bustle, now seemed indifferent, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding within its limits. She replayed Alex's expression in her mind. That lingering gaze. It wasn't accusatory, not directly. It was more like an animal sensing danger. Or perhaps a deep, profound sadness. When she arrived at Professor Thorne's cluttered office, the smell of old paper and dust filled the air. The professor, a man with a wild mane of white hair and piercing blue eyes, sat surrounded by stacks of books, arcane charts, and what looked like ancient tablets. "Miss Chen," he greeted, adjusting his spectacles. "The plot thickens, I presume?" Sarah quickly, concisely, laid out everything. The ghost like Alex, the typewriter, the fragments of KGB and Operation Nightingale, the photos of his family, the blackmail, the airport terminal, the deadline. And finally, the pen and the micro-printed cipher. Thorne listened, completely engrossed, occasionally muttering to himself, fascinating or remarkable. When she finished, he picked up the tiny scroll, his fingers surprisingly nimble for a man of his age. He squinted at the symbols. A geometric substitution cipher, combined with a numerical shift, he mused, tracing the symbols with a magnifying glass. Definitely old school. And if your hypothesis about the one-time pad is correct, then the key is the real challenge. I think the key is his watch, Sarah interjected, explaining her theory about Alex's analog watch, his consistent use of it, and the potential for a rotating bezel or an internal mechanism. Thorne's eyes gleamed. Brilliant, Miss Chin. Absolutely brilliant. A physical key, unique to the agent, a rotating element for a variable shift. Yes. This points to a highly compartmentalized system, designed for maximum deniability. He stood up, pacing his small office. But to confirm, we need the watch itself, or at least a precise diagram of its functionality. And even then, it's a guess. I don't have the watch, Sarah admitted, despair creeping into her voice. But he's wearing it. He always does. Then we have a dilemma, don't we? Thorne stroked his beard. Without the key, this cipher is, by its very nature, unbreakable. That's the point of a one-time pad. It generates true randomness, making cryptanalysis virtually impossible. Sarah's heart sank. She had come so close. So there's no way? There's a way, Thorne said, his eyes narrowing, but it's a gamble. If Alex is receiving instructions, it's not just this single message. There will be other elements, other channels used to confirm or elaborate. Dead drops, visual cues, perhaps even specific movements. This message isn't the entirety of the plan, but a critical component, likely the activation sequence, or the final target details. He pointed to a small, almost imperceptible symbol at the bottom of the scroll. This, Miss Chen, is a control character. It's a signal. Not part of the message itself, but an instruction. I believe it's telling him to look for another message, or to perform a specific action that then reveals the final phase of the plan. It's an interrupt. A go code. A go code? Sarah repeated, feeling a fresh wave of dread. Yes. It's a trigger. It tells him, the time is now. Execute Plan B, C, or D, which you already know, and this is the specific variable for this execution. So he already knows the plan? Sarah asked, horrified. The package? He knows what it is. Likely in broad strokes. This code would give him the specific details, the exact target within Terminal C, the precise nature of the package, perhaps a specific contact or rendezvous point. Thorne leaned forward, his voice grave. Miss Chun, you are not just trying to stop a man. You are trying to intercept a pre-programmed sequence. We need to find his next move. The specific action he will take after deciphering this. The clock on Thorne's wall ticked ominously. 12:15 p.m. Less than 2 hours and 45 minutes. How do we do that? Sarah asked, feeling a cold knot of fear in her stomach. Thorne looked at her, his eyes filled with a new kind of intensity. We go where he goes. We watch. And we pray he makes a mistake, however small. Because if this is a go code, he's already set in motion. The only way to stop it is to get to the package before he does, or to stop him from retrieving it. But where does he go? Sarah whispered. He's back at the office now. Then we have to predict his movements, Thorne replied. Think like the agent. Think like the blackmailer. Where would the final piece of the puzzle be delivered, securely, in such a short time frame? Suddenly, a thought struck Sarah. The payphone. The one he used the other night. It was an analog communication. It was out of sight. And it was just blocks from the office. It was a perfect dead drop location. The payphone, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. He used a payphone 2 nights ago. I saw him. Thorne's eyes lit up. Excellent, Miss Chin. A physical dead drop. The last-minute instructions. Let's go! He grabbed an old, worn trench coat. Time is of the essence. The streets of the city blurred past as Sarah drove, Professor Thorne navigating from the passenger seat, his eyes scanning every block. The payphone booth she'd seen Alex use was on a quiet corner, nestled between an old bookstore and a perpetually closed dry cleaner, obscured from the main street by a large oak tree. It was perfect. Secluded, yet public enough not to draw undue attention. As they approached, Sarah felt her heart clench. There he was. Alex. He was standing by the payphone, his back to them, his posture rigid, shoulders hunched. He was wearing his usual nondescript office attire, but today, it seemed to cling to him like a shroud of despair. He wasn't on the phone. He was just waiting. He's waiting for a signal, or a drop, Thorne murmured, his voice tight. He must have decoded enough from your pin cipher to know this is the next stage. Sarah pulled into a parking spot further down the street, making sure their car wasn't immediately visible. She cut the engine. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the frantic beat of her own pulse. What do we do? She whispered. He'll see me. He'll know. He's expecting someone, but not you, Thorne replied, his eyes fixed on Alex. The blackmailers likely have a system. A visual cue, a specific time, perhaps a signal from a passing car. We need to observe. We need to understand the mechanism before we interfere. One wrong move, and they'll know Alex is compromised. And then, his family. They watched, a silent tableau of urban tension. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Alex remained motionless, a statue of quiet desperation. Then, a dark sedan, unremarkable in every way, slowed as it passed the payphone booth. It didn't stop. But as it drove by, Sarah distinctly saw a hand emerge from the back window, momentarily holding up a single, red rose, before quickly retracting it. Alex stiffened. His head, imperceptibly at first, shifted. His eyes followed the sedan until it turned the corner and vanished. Then he moved. Not quickly, not frantically, but with a practiced, almost surgical precision. He stepped into the payphone booth. He didn't pick up the receiver. Instead, he reached down, his hand disappearing under the metal shelf of the phone unit. A faint click echoed in the stillness. He pulled out a small, flat package, wrapped tightly in plain brown paper, the size of a paperback book. There it is, Thorne breathed, his voice barely audible. The package. Alex didn't look at it. He simply tucked it inside his jacket, a gesture so swift and practiced it was almost invisible. He straightened his clothes, ran a hand through his hair, and then began to walk, not back towards the office, but in the opposite direction, towards the bus stop on the main road. His destination was undoubtedly Terminal C. We have to get it, Sarah said, her voice choked with urgency. We have to stop him. Yes, but how? Thorne countered, his mind clearly racing. He's armed, trained, and he's already under immense stress. Confrontation could trigger a panic response, or worse, make him think his family is already lost, giving him no reason to hold back. I have to talk to him, Sarah decided, her voice firm, conviction hardening her resolve. I'm the only one who knows. Maybe I can appeal to him. Explain that I understand. He's a deep-cover agent, Miss Chen. Trust is a luxury he can't afford, especially not with a colleague who just exposed his entire life, Thorne warned. He might see you as part of the threat, or an accidental complication he needs to eliminate. I have to try, Sarah insisted, already fumbling with her seatbelt. If I don't, thousands die, and his family will still be in danger. She opened the car door. Professor, can you follow discreetly? Keep an eye out? If things go wrong. She didn't finish the sentence. She got out of the car, heart hammering against her ribs, and started walking towards the bus stop, keeping Alex in sight. He was about a block ahead, walking with a renewed sense of purpose, a grim determination etched on his face. He was on his way to execute the plan. Sarah quickened her pace. She had to intercept him before he boarded that bus, before he got lost in the anonymity of public transport and the airport crowds. She had to appeal to the man she now knew he was. A victim, a father, a husband, trapped in an unbearable situation. As she got closer, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness of his jaw. He reached the bus stop just as a bus pulled up. Her window of opportunity was closing. "Alex," she called out, her voice cutting through the urban hum. He froze. His head snapped around, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and something else, recognition, and perhaps despair. He saw her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Raw, unadulterated fear. Not for himself, she realized, but for his family. He didn't hesitate. He took a quick glance around, then bolted, not towards the bus, but down a narrow alleyway beside the bus stop, a desperate animal fleeing a trap. "Alex, wait!" Sarah cried, sprinting after him, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I know about your family. I know you're being blackmailed." Her words, she hoped, would stop him, but they seemed to have the opposite effect. He only ran faster, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. Sarah didn't know if he was running from her, or because of her, fearing that her presence signaled that his cover was truly blown, and his family was already condemned. She plunged into the alleyway, the smell of refuse and damp concrete filling her nostrils. It was a labyrinth of overflowing dumpsters and graffiti-scarred walls. She could hear his footsteps echoing ahead, fading fast. The alley reeked of damp concrete and forgotten dreams. Sarah's lungs burned, each breath a searing protest, but she pushed through the exhaustion. Alex was fast, but he wasn't running with the cold efficiency of a trained operative anymore. This was the frantic, stumbling escape of a cornered animal. She caught up to him deeper in the labyrinth, where the alley opened into a small, dead-end courtyard, choked with overgrown weeds and overflowing dumpsters. He was slumped against a crumbling brick wall, chest heaving, his face pale and slick with sweat. The brown paper package was clutched in his hand, a dark, sinister weight. His eyes, when they met hers, were no longer just sad or weary. They were haunted, wild with a raw fear she hadn't seen before. He looked less like an IT guy and more like a man about to break. "Alex, stop," she gasped, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. "Please. I'm not here to hurt you." "I know. I know about your family." His head snapped up, a primal flicker of anger in his eyes, quickly replaced by a profound despair. "You know nothing," he choked out, his voice hoarse. "You should not be here. You are in danger." "I know about Operation Nightingale," Sarah pressed on, pushing past his words. "I saw the journal. The pictures. Your wife. Your son. They're forcing you, aren't they?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Alex stared at her, his facade finally crumbling. The muscles in his jaw relaxed, his shoulders slumped further. He looked utterly defeated. The package slipped from his grasp, landing with a soft thud on the grimy ground between them. "They have them," he whispered, his voice cracking, thick with a barely suppressed sob. "My Natasha. My young Dmitri. My only family." He looked at the package, then back at Sarah, a flicker of genuine terror in his eyes. "They told me if I failed, if I went to authorities, if I even looked at you the wrong way, they would make sure I watched them die." Slowly. Sarah's heart ached. The man before her wasn't a villain. He was a desperate, grieving soul trapped in an impossible nightmare. "I believe you, Alex," she said softly, taking a cautious step closer. "But what is this?" She gestured to the package. "What are they making you do?" He shuddered, his gaze fixed on the brown paper. "It's not what you think. Not a bomb. Not an explosion. It's worse. It's silent. Insidious." He swallowed hard. "It's a neurotoxin. Developed decades ago. A prototype. Designed to target a very specific genetic markers. But they've refined it. made it airborne. Sarah felt a cold dread spread through her. A neurotoxin? What kind of genetic markers? Who is the target? Not a race. Not a nationality, Alex explained, his voice strained, almost robotic, as he recounted the horrifying details. It's designed to trigger a specific type of rapid onset, fatal allergic reaction in people with a particular enzyme deficiency. It's rare, but present in about 1 in 1,000 people globally. But its primary vector, he hesitated, looking utterly sickened, is designed to spread rapidly through the ventilation system of a specific type of commercial aircraft. The flight originating from Terminal C. They want to create a global panic, a fear of air travel, of everyone. The horror of it twisted Sarah's gut. Not a direct attack on a specific group, but a random, terrifying lottery of death designed to sow maximum chaos and fear. But why? Who would want to do that? Before Alex could answer, a shadow fell across the alley entrance. Professor Thorne, looking surprisingly agile for his age, appeared, his face grim. He took in the scene. Alex, slumped against the wall. Sarah, the package. The package, I presume? Thorne asked, his voice calm, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. And what kind of devil's work is it, Mr. Volkov? Alex looked at Thorne, then back at Sarah, a flicker of conflict in his eyes. He didn't know this man. Could he trust him? He's with me, Alex, Sarah said quickly. He's an expert. He understands codes. He understands the Cold War. He can help us. Alex studied Thorne for a long moment, then slowly nodded, his shoulders slumping in resignation. They want to demonstrate their capability. To cause mass panic. To destabilize global markets, trigger new security policies. Perhaps even a new Cold War for profit. Or for power. They are selling the cure to the highest bidder, but first, they must demonstrate the disease. Professor Thorne, with the package now cautiously placed on a clean piece of newspaper he'd found, listened intently as Alex, urged by Sarah, began to unravel his story. The details were chilling. Operation Nightingale, Alex explained, his voice flat, emotionless, as if reciting a long-memorized file, was a Soviet program to embed highly trained agents deep within Western societies. Not for immediate espionage, but for long-term influence or, in extreme circumstances, strategic disruption. I was chosen young, trained from childhood. My family, they were also part of the program, a failsafe. If an agent went rogue, their family was used as leverage. But the Soviet Union fell, Sarah interjected. How could this program still exist? The network didn't vanish, Thorne answered, his gaze fixed on Alex. It fractured. Some agents defected. Some were forgotten. Others went private. The most dangerous elements are often those who no longer serve a flag, but only themselves. They likely acquired the full archives of Operation Nightingale, agent profiles, family details, blackmail material. And now, they're monetizing it. Alex nodded grimly. My handler, Voronov, was one of them. He approached me 5 years ago. Said the network was reforming, under new management. They demanded contributions, services. At first, it was simple data retrieval, planting minor bugs, things that wouldn't directly harm anyone. But then, my family. Natasha developed a rare disease. They offered the experimental treatment. A miracle cure, they called it. It worked, but it came with a price. He looked away, shame etched on his face. They found my son, Dmitri, in Russia. He was a student. They picked him up, took him. Now they have both of them. They send me photos, updates on their treatment, always with a countdown to the next service I must perform. Today is the final payment. Thorne picked up the package. And this is the final payment. A neurotoxin designed to trigger a global pandemic of fear, causing panic, crashing markets, and making the cure they'll undoubtedly sell incredibly valuable. He peeled back a corner of the brown paper, revealing a sleek, metallic canister, no larger than a soda can. A complex array of nozzles and a small, digital timer were visible. It was chillingly sophisticated. This is not just a threat, Mr. Volkov. This is an act of war, perpetrated by individuals for profit. They're called the Phoenix Collective, Alex revealed, his voice barely audible. Former KGB GRU, some rogue scientists, even a few ex-CIA agents who found common ground in exploitation. They operate globally, a shadow economy built on secrets and leverage. They resurface old assets, activate forgotten plots. It's a cruel game. And your family? Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern. Where are they? A clinic in a remote part of Siberia, Alex said, his eyes filled with despair. They're well guarded. My handler, Voronov, makes sure of that. He's the one who gave me the final instructions via the dead drop. He ensures I'm monitored. He'll be watching the news, waiting for the report of Flight 619. Flight 619, Thorne repeated, a new urgency in his voice. From Terminal C. The one with the ventilation system vulnerability. What time is it scheduled to depart? Alex looked at his watch. The analog watch Sarah had theorized was part of his cipher. 15:30, 3:30 p.m. The device is programmed to activate 30 minutes into the flight, just as they reach cruising altitude. Enough time for it to circulate through the cabin. Sarah looked at her own watch. 12:58 p.m. They had less than 2.5 hours until the flight took off, and even less until Alex was supposed to have deployed the device. The time he had to place the package on the flight was fast approaching. He likely needed to bypass security, plant it in a specific location on the plane itself. We need to stop this, Sarah declared, her mind already shifting into project manager mode. We need to get this device out of here. And we need to get your family back, Alex. How? Alex looked utterly hopeless. They are untouchable. And if I don't deliver, they'll know. And Natasha and Dmitri. No, Thorne said, a glint in his eye. We will deliver. But not the neurotoxin. We will deliver a message. A very clear message to this Phoenix Collective that their game is over. He looked at Sarah, then at Alex. Mr. Volkov, you have been playing a dangerous game for too long. But now you have allies. Mischin is not just a project manager. She is tenacious. And I, for all my eccentricities, know a thing or two about untangling old threads. We have a plan. But it requires absolute trust and flawless execution. Are you with us, Alex? Alex looked from Thorne's determined face to Sarah's unwavering resolve. For the first time in years, a glimmer of hope, however faint, sparked in his haunted eyes. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice firmer now, a hint of his old, efficient self returning. The plan was audacious, desperate, and depended entirely on their unique combination of skills. They laid it out quickly, using the dusty courtyard as their impromptu war room. First, the device, Thorne stated, holding up the metallic canister. We need to disable it. Mr. Volkov, can you do that without triggering any countermeasures or alerting the blackmailers? Alex nodded, his IT expertise kicking in. It's a complex system, but I designed the protocols for disarming these types of devices during my training. It requires a specific sequence, a series of precise pressure points, and a small override key. It's in my desk drawer. The one in my office cubicle. We'll need to make it look like you successfully deployed it, Sarah added. They'll be watching. We need to fool them. I have an idea for that, Thorne said, a mischievous glint in his eye. A little theatricality from my days studying ancient warfare. A decoy. But first, we need the key. Sarah knew this was another high-stakes risk. Alex's cubicle. The place where it all began. I'll go, she said without hesitation. I know how to get in and out quickly. Alex, you stay here with Professor Thorne. Don't move. Don't attract attention. Alex looked at her, a silent gratitude passing between them. The key is hidden under the false bottom of the pen holder, beneath the red pen. Sarah nodded, imprinted the instruction, and was off. She raced back to the office, moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The office, usually a source of mundane drudgery, was now the first vital step in preventing a global catastrophe. She made it to Alex's desk, her heart pounding, and with nimble fingers, retrieved the tiny, intricate override key. She was back in the alley within minutes, handing the key to Alex. "Good," Thorne said, his eyes scanning the alley. "Now, Mr. Volkov, disable this device. Ms. Chun, your project management skills are about to be put to the ultimate test. We need to create a convincing replica. Something that looks exactly like this, but is utterly harmless. Do we have access to any similar containers? An aerosol can, maybe? Something we can modify to match the weight and feel?" Sarah's mind immediately went to the office supply closet, a treasure trove of industrial-strength cleaning supplies. "Yes. I know exactly what we can use. And I can modify it to look identical. We have a 3D printer for prototypes too. I can make a fake timer." The three of them worked with a frantic, focused energy. Alex, with the override key, expertly disabled the neurotoxin device, rendering it inert. Thorne and Sarah, using their combined ingenuity, meticulously crafted a convincing decoy using an empty air freshener can, spray paint, and a small, flashing LED from an old circuit board to simulate the timer. It was a crude but effective imitation. "This will get you past initial visual checks, Mr. Volkov," Thorne instructed, handing the fake package to Alex. "You proceed to Terminal C. Act exactly as you were instructed. Blend in. Place this decoy where they expect the real one to be placed. The goal is to make them believe the operation was successful. That buys us time." "Time for what?" Alex asked, clutching the fake package. "Time for us to expose them," Sarah answered, her eyes burning with resolve. "The Phoenix Collective. They need to be stopped, and your family needs to be freed. We have the real device. We have your testimony. Professor Thorne and I will take this to the highest authority, with irrefutable proof. But they need to believe you've succeeded first." The plan was set. Alex, with the fake package, was to proceed to Terminal C. Sarah and Thorne, with the disabled neurotoxin device, would head to a secure, prearranged contact Thorne had with an old intelligence acquaintance. As Alex prepared to leave, he turned to Sarah. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low. "You could have just called the police. You could have been safe." "Because you're not a monster, Alex," Sarah replied, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "You're a victim. And nobody deserves to have their family used against them like this. And because it's the right thing to do." A fleeting, genuine smile touched Alex's lips, the first Sarah had ever seen. "Thank you," he murmured, before disappearing into the urban anonymity, heading towards the airport, towards the unknown. Sarah and Thorne, with the deactivated neurotoxin device safely secured in a lead-lined bag Thorne retrieved from his office, raced against the clock. The traffic was a nightmare. Every red light felt like a personal affront. Thorne was on the phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones to his contact, his voice a gravelly murmur, as he explained the impossible situation. "They're taking us seriously," Thorne finally announced, hanging up. "My contact is arranging a secure rendezvous. But time is critical. They want to verify the device themselves." As they finally broke free of the traffic, a news alert flashed across Sarah's phone. "Breaking. Major security alert at Airport Terminal C. Unconfirmed reports of an attempted terror incident aboard Flight 619. Authorities on scene." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Alex," she whispered. Had he been caught? Had the decoy been discovered? Or worse, had the Phoenix Collective somehow bypassed his efforts and launched a real attack? "No, wait," Thorne said, squinting at his own phone. Another update. Situation contained. False alarm reported. All passengers safe. Suspect apprehended. It's Alex. He must have been caught with the decoy. But they're saying false alarm. That means the decoy worked. They haven't found the real one. They don't know it's disabled." A wave of relief washed over Sarah, quickly followed by a fresh surge of fear for Alex. He was apprehended. But his family was still in danger. The Phoenix Collective would see the news, believe he succeeded, and perhaps release his family. But what if they interrogated Alex? What if they realized he had double-crossed them? They pulled up to a discreet, unmarked building. Two stern-faced agents met them at the door. Sarah handed over the lead-lined bag. "This is the real device," she stated, her voice firm. "Alex Volkov has been apprehended. He's a victim of blackmail. His family is being held hostage in Siberia." The agents looked at each other, their faces unreadable. "We've been briefed, Ms. Chen." "Professor Thorne, your information is being corroborated." One of the agents took out a satellite phone. "We're moving on the Siberian clinic. We have a window." The frantic race was far from over. Alex was in custody, his future uncertain. His family was still in peril, a pawn in a game far larger than any of them could comprehend. But for the first time, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. They had stopped the immediate disaster. They had the evidence. And perhaps, just perhaps, they had struck a blow against the shadow network that had twisted so many lives. The quiet IT guy, the unlikely spy, had finally found his voice, and in doing so, had helped avert a horror that would have reshaped the world. The fight was just beginning. The Phoenix Collective was still out there, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the globe. And the story of Alex Volkov, the quiet IT guy, was a stark reminder of the silent wars still being waged, long after the Cold War supposedly ended. The story of Alex Volkov is a chilling testament to the enduring power of deep cover networks, and the unseen battles still being fought in our modern world. But Alex's case isn't an isolated incident. There are countless other shadow organizations, remnants of old conflicts, operating in the gray areas of geopolitics, ready to leverage any weakness for profit or power. If you want to dive deeper into the dark world of these elusive networks, and how they've shaped global events from the shadows, then click on this video and hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget to comment. What would you do in that situation? Keep coming.